This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, my name is Novo Mana, and welcome to another session of the Technology Review Council. Today, I'm pleased to not only invite two very strong professionals around the Pulse app, but longtime friends, which is always a nice thing, Anne Saulnier and John Hobart. And I will just simply turn this over to the two of you to introduce yourself, but I got the opportunity to see this app, and I think it's an extremely interesting approach to the world of recruiting. So, Anne, John, you're on.
All right. Well, thanks, Nove.
Yeah, thank you.
We're super excited to be here and to meet everybody. So we're Ann and John from Pulse, and we help HR professionals understand their talent pool. So we have our roots in the HCM world. So Nove and Carrie and I know each other from back in the day when we were all on the Oracle HCM user group together.
This is ancient history for us now.
Yeah. And throughout the years, we've worked in the HCM space on Oracle EBS and Taleo, in Oracle Learning Management, recruiting, and then we ventured off into the digital experience marketing spot, which was a little bit different. We've been running a remote workforce for about a decade now, and so we have a good understanding of what it means to find and attract talent that is not necessarily in your backyard.
Yeah, the funny thing is we went through a long period where we used to work really hard to come up with an address for an office so that we would look legit, because we had, we were hiring completely remote a decade ago. And
before it was cool. Yeah.
Way before it was cool. And it wasn't cool and it wasn't fun. We ran teams in India, Belarus, Russia, China, another one in India, and then we met this one guy online in Croatia, and he led us to another great person who led us to another great person, and eventually we had that network over in Croatia, and since expanded into Canada and Denmark. So we're running not a large team by any measure, but 40 people or so across 4 different countries, and it took us a long time to figure out how to find what characterizes a good place to find good candidates. Like, where do you want to spend your time looking? And we have a couple of things that we can share there, and you guys can you can play in that space too.
All right. So the tool that we built is called Pulse. It's at pulse.app, and it allows you to analyze a group of people, so potentially your high-performing employees or the folks that are coming to your career pages and your applicant tracking system, and it uses the anonymous latitude and longitude coordinates of where they're coming from, and it allows you to identify the neighborhoods where either your top talent or your potential applicants are coming from. And then it shines a spotlight on those areas using demographics and ethnographics. So it looks at things like what the median ages and income and education levels. And then we also use anonymized social listening to shine a spotlight on their most likely surroundings. And anonymized social listening is definitely not as scary as it might sound.
No, anonymized social listening works like this. We collect billions of data points from a bunch of different social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Foursquare, and then we feed that, we strip out all of the personally identifiable information, that's critical, and then we feed the resulting data into a machine learning algorithm which classifies them by interest and intent. And then an ethnographer goes in and labels those clusters. And then what the Pulse app does is it converts that into a format that recruiters and people who are looking at their talent pool can use.
Yeah. So if we look at a specific example, let's look at Moab, Utah in the US. If you're not a local, so we are not local to Moab, although we know and love it. We're based in southern Maine, to answer Rob's question in the chat. And if we had a group of talent that resided in Moab, we might not know if we weren't locals that the demographic is predominantly white, has a median age of 36 years old, 53% home ownership, and the top social segments for this area are outdoor adventures, wanderlust, natural beauty, and mindfulness and spirituality. So this is something that we could deduce from a visit to an applicant tracking system, so that we could kind of paint a picture of the neighborhood that the person that's visiting your site is coming from. And the application that we have allows you to view your traffic information or your talent information on a map, so that you can see hotspots on the map where you're getting the most traffic, and then the top social segments that resonate with those areas as well.
One of the things that really exciting to us about this is that you can, coming out of an HR system, we know how to identify high potential and high performing employees in our existing talent pool. And what we can do is we can look at where those people are coming from, and then we can do lookalike locations, not just across the country, but in Canada and the UK, and see, are there other places similar to this where people are engaging online, talking about the same things, interested in the same things. It might be about science and technology, it might be about life sciences, it might be about coffee, it might be about dogs. But there's a common thread that will hold those together, and then we can look for places that would be well suited to a geographically focused recruitment effort. So as an example, in our company, we're looking for people who are, well, for one, we're looking for people who are willing to take a pay cut in return for living outside of major metropolitan areas. And a lot of times we're hiring highly technical people. So these are people who can make top dollar in a big city, but we're looking for the people who like canoeing and kayaking and looking at the stars, but who are equally talented and maybe looking for a place to raise a family. So we get a lot of young families and stuff like that. So we knew what we were looking for, and we were instinctively going to lookalike locations, and that's why we're based in Maine. But what Pulse does is it surfaces those characteristics on a map, and then you can go in and say, wow, these are places that are probably good candidates for us to go look for candidates.
Yep. So on the marketing side, you can separate your most engaged traffic and see what differentiates that from your baseline traffic if you're looking to make sales. As an example, in the commerce space. In the recruitment space, you can also filter down your traffic so that in your applicant tracking system or on your career page, you can also take a look at the folks that are coming in and see what differentiates the talent pool from your baseline visitors on your site.
So Anne, I know that you said you would take questions, and I have a question. You know that. So I love the fact that you've got a map here, and you know, I always like to try to relate it to current environment. We're probably very tired of hearing about the COVID this and COVID that and work from home and that. But the perspective is that I'm seeing a lot of recruiting happening where the boundaries of where they were thinking they needed to look has changed vastly. End of sentence. And as a result of that, as you are gathering data as it is being spurred by a particular position or maybe some kind of a role, let's put it that way, rather than a position. Do you believe that Pulse will start gathering that information so that it says, hey, Nov, over the many clients that we have doing this, Portland is a great place to go look for XYZ, or Podunk, wherever that would be, is a good place to go find. So in other words, you're sitting on a wealth of information that you gathered from the matching of hotspots, if you will, related to a role. Is that something you're looking to or doing already? And is that something that a new client coming in could avail themselves of?
So we do have the ability to dive into the individual segments. So if you have an idea for somebody in a specific role, we can take a look at the details on the demographics for a given type of person. So if you know that your top performing employees fit a specific mold and have various lifestyles and interests, then and right now in the tool today, you could manually go through and say, okay, I think that somebody that is an engine enthusiast or somebody in the bookish demographic would be a good fit, and that seems to be a common thread that we have among our top performers. As far as machine learning and clustering, some of that.
The one that pops into my head is like Lululemon, would be a company that probably have a strong affinity for yoga, wanderlust, outdoor adventures, that type of people. And so depending on the role that you're looking for, if it's a remote capable role, which we're suddenly finding out a lot of roles are, if you wanted somebody to fit company culture, or you're looking at the existing data on your high performing employees, either one of those could lead you to a geographic area that would be ripe for you. And typically, I mean, what people are doing now, and I think what a lot of the bigger companies are figuring out, and this is bad for us, is that there are a lot of rural or semi-rural areas that are full of candidates. And so you guys are going to ruin all of our fun, but I think that's
well, and I probably should have qualified it. So what I'm seeing, and we had a referral program come through the Technology Review Council, which was interesting. But as you're trying to pinpoint where you're finding successful candidates in a geographical area coming to you and fitting your profiles, you might say, maybe putting a referral program maybe through a LinkedIn or Facebook for people in that area. Let me go out and do so. I think it changes the whole face on which we're doing things. It's always been, let's have employees get the referrals. But, in all honesty, I'll take a referral from anybody if it works, and they probably earned it. So I'm thinking that you've got a great deal of potential extension based on the data you're gathering. That's really the premise of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, recruiting is marketing, and from the marketing world, I mean, anyone will tell you that the idea that you can plant a Facebook ad or a LinkedIn ad or anything like that to get brand awareness out there, and you spray the whole country, you're going to spend a huge amount of money on ads that are going to land flat, because you're either not talking to people the right way based on the demographics or the qualities of the neighborhoods you're talking to. Whereas successful marketing campaigns, and again, I'm stuck on the idea that recruiting and marketing are they're not equivalent, but they have a lot in common. That by geographically bounding the areas in which you're looking for candidates, you can run really, really effective campaigns to attract talent.
Good. Didn't mean to take you totally off track. Sorry. Go for it.
We're beyond track. We don't mind if it wanders around. We're happy to have a conversation. And the more questions you guys drop in the channel, the happier we are. So hit us up.
So yeah, one of the other views that we have in the application is you can take a deep dive look at a specific location and view a lot of details about the demographic and ethnographic breakdown of that specific area. Things like population density and the median income, what the top segments are for social listening in those areas as well. So it can give you an idea of where you are today, and then other areas that you can target that are similar. The other thing that it allows you to do if you run a digital experience platform like EpiServer or Sitecore is that you can actually personalize the message that is shown on your career page depending on where somebody is coming from. So if you know that you have a specific role that fits well with a given demographic, you could potentially bubble that up to the top if you have somebody who's coming from an area where networking is strong or outdoor adventures are strong. You could also tailor the hero banner or the benefits packages or items that you would want to highlight depending on where somebody's coming from, even if you know nothing about them. And one of our core tenets at the company is to use data for good. So we're definitely not using any household level data or personal information. Everything is anonymized. It's not cookie based. So it really is just looking at that anonymous location information from where somebody's coming from and what is surrounding them, and not anything specific about that individual person.
Yeah, the really critical idea is that we're looking at these neighborhoods primarily from the perspective of what are they talking about online. So it's a pool of information that people volunteer, and then we take the additional step of stripping all of the personal data out, if there is any.
Yep. The other really cool thing that we can do is to send real-time alerts based on pulses that you get in traffic or changes in segments. So if you do a job posting or you advertise in a different location and you notice that there's a real surge in traffic, then the system can notify you in real time so that you can have those real-time conversations instead of reacting to things kind of looking in the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've seen that in marketing where somebody puts out an Instagram post, it takes off online, they get a pulse and interest with the brand, and that might be for a recruiting purpose. And what we can do, to restate what Anne just said, is we can look at the baseline traffic and subtract that from what we're seeing. And doing that, we can see, well, who is it exactly that's engaging with this that wasn't there or wasn't represented like this in the past. So it allows you to craft a message to follow up on it, right? If you're enjoying success, to ride that wave as you're building it.
And so yeah, just to summarize, we've got an easy way to analyze your traffic. In the next release, we also are rolling out the ability to upload spreadsheet data as well. So if you have just zip codes of top performing employees and you wanted to analyze the differences and the various neighborhoods that they're coming from to get an idea of the different segments that are prevalent within your organization now to help you in your recruiting strategy going forward, then you can upload that directly and then see differences there and use that in your online traffic as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we really want to focus on is the lack of an integration, if you will. We want to make the system as easy to use with as low a barrier to entry. So we all know about, if you want to integrate something with an ATS, you're looking at a significant, you need a development team, you need 6 months, you need, all of these things. We wanted to make it simple enough that you could just download a spreadsheet of all those zip codes of your high performers, and we'll give you an infographic back and a PowerPoint that describes what is the glue that holds those communities together.
Yeah, with no personally identifiable information traversing between the systems.
Yeah, we can't collect personally identifiable information.
Yeah, so that's kind of our spiel.
Yeah.
So any questions from the audience in general about the concept of the Pulse app? I do have some questions about maybe success stories around some of your clients and so on. To me, like I say, you said earlier, John, recruiting is marketing, and that's really a very good approach. But I think we do the recruiting, if you will, the marketing of the jobs one way, and the recruiting completely different. And so you're trying to bridge that gap and make it a little more integrated, if you will. So thoughts, anything from the audience with regards to what has been presented as of now?
Well, I was wondering if you guys wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about how you balance the machine learning and the human component there. We talked a little bit about, how you avoid unintentional bias, right? And kind of the modeling of that. Could you just describe that process a little bit?
Yeah, so it's a really, really good question, and in all fairness, it's one of the hardest questions that there is in the whole machine learning space, right? Implicit bias. Machine learning is used for all sorts of stuff that you would wish that it's not used for, from sentencing guidelines to loans, like what banks use to score people who don't have credit, right? So they go straight into the demographics and ethnographics, even. And they use machine learning models, and that shrouds the fact that you're actually shooting for implicit bias with, without being able to say that, what you did is your fault. We look at it a very, very different way. So when we're analyzing for top neighborhoods or similar neighborhoods, in those cases, you weigh things differently, right? So we weigh what people talk about online we give that much greater significance in the calculation than we do ethnographic or even demographic, right? So the median income in a neighborhood is it important? Yes, but nowhere near as important as whether they like dogs, for example. Is that perfect? No, absolutely not. There's no perfect answer for it, and the issue of implicit bias in anytime you're using any algorithm, whether it's machine learning or not, is something that you just have to do battle with and be cognizant of. I think that if you look at the companies on a spectrum of, and at one end you have companies that track household level data, they're using browser fingerprinting, they're pixeling you, they're chasing you around the internet, showing you ads. So at one end you have this really invasive an invasion of your privacy. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have, I like to think of us fighting the good fight, trying to do it without personally identifiable information, without fingerprinting people, and trying to weigh the right things, right? If you're looking for people, if you have a company culture where people do a lot of yoga, we like to think that that's more important than the ethnographic makeup of the neighborhood they come from.
Great. So Ann and John, you've got a question here, and I'll give Paul the credit for asking, but he asked me to ask it in an intelligent way, and that was a bad move in his own right. But nonetheless, he's counting on me to ask it. So here's the real example. Here's Nove, gray hair, got 23 tweets, very minimal Facebook exposure. Well, he gets on LinkedIn once in a while. He's got a website, though. That's a good thing. How do I rank up in there when I'm not socially active in that sense? And Paul, thanks for the perspective. I'm a living example of the fact that you'd miss me in this process. At least
so I can answer that question. So there's two different ways. There's two different ways to look at it. One, just like you have population density, we have social activity density for an area. So, in the middle of the Ozarks, actually not the Ozarks, a bad example, but in, somewhere in the middle of Appalachia, there are like 3 people with a cell phone and they don't tweet very much. If we got something from them or if we received traffic from them, we would weight that correspondingly, higher, because it's surprising in and of itself. And then the other way to look at it is that we're not looking at you and we're not looking at your tweets. We're looking at what people in your neighborhood are talking about online. So in that sense, if there's a skew, it's going to be we're going to be looking at what folks in their 20s to 40s or 50s are talking about online, because we know that they're far more active online.
Gotcha. Okay. Paul, I hope that kind of hit the nail. It did bring up a couple of things. You talked about weighting. So the question becomes, as you say, maybe I want to try to adapt my recruiting efforts and my marketing efforts, if you will, towards that of people that would, I think, fit my culture. To your point, like maybe Lululemon is yoga or something with the case. So can I help you weight the factors of what you get out of your marketing research to then surface my culture as being the way I want it to versus what you're telling me is out there? I mean, I'm kind of looking at how much client input do I have to tailor this, if you will.
I think so what we do with everybody is we say, let's take a look at all of the data that you have, and then let's see what are the top segments. We always talk about top segments. What are the top segments for that? And then let's look at a subset of that. Let's look at your high performers and let's look at those top segments, and let's see if they're different. And if they are different, does that make sense to you as a recruiter? Because there's still a human element to this. It's not like it's a system that's going to tell you how to go out and what to do and how to do it. But what it can do is it can surface, and what our favorite part of it is that it surfaces surprises. People are like, no way, like they find out that, in the marketing context, you say you're selling coffee and you find out that for whatever reason, your Instagram posts are playing really, really well. I'm just looking at the screen right now. with LGBTQ culture and hops and brews, right? So you can go out there and you can craft messages, especially today, that are going to play well with that audience, and you attract the kinds of people that you want to attract.
Gotcha. So like you say, I mean, really your job is like a product, and you're trying to identify the target market. That's pretty much the way it looks. So I'm curious about the perspective then, as you're looking for the various things that are out on the internet. Are you looking at other sources? You've mentioned Instagram and a couple of things. Any new thing? There's a lot of like neighborhood community things that are happening where people are trading, whatever it is that's going on in the neighborhood and thoughts and things. Like you say, I'm trying to measure what people are talking the most about. Are you going to those sources as well? Is your marketing net being tossed out a little further now?
Well, we're always looking for great new data sets and for great new vendors. So we work with third-party vendors who do, for instance, we work with Spatial AI, fantastic company out of Cincinnati, and I mean, they're doing absolutely incredible work with the social listening and those ethnographic-based groupings. Totally check them out, and then we work with the U.S. Census data, StatsCan, Eurostat. We're always looking for more data sets, and we curate those. We look to see whether we think that there's something of value there, and then if there is, then we massage them into a shape where this tool can make use of them. So I mean, the answer to your question is, 50% of what we do, maybe more than 50% now, is looking for new data sets and how to mesh them up, especially meshing up data across international boundaries. So maybe you want to focus your recruitment effort in areas where there's higher unemployment, but every state defines unemployment differently. The United States, Canada, UK, all of Europe, we have great data sets all across Europe and North America and Mexico for that, but the unemployment rate is defined differently. So therein lies the challenge, right?
So I understand Rob sent a question over, and I think directly to you. So if you want to go ahead and bring that up, it had to do with a use case. Okay. And while you're doing that, let me ask a slightly different question. So we've had a couple of, I'll call them assessment, AI-based assessments that the theory is put it at the front end of the funnel, and we'll sort out based on these assessments whether these people are more fit for the job and your culture and so on. How do you see that vis-a-vis what you're trying to do? I mean, I would almost say you're like 179 degrees different in the approach than that individualized perspective of the fit. Do you see that as competition to you? Is it something you would ever see melding together to be even more refined in the recruiting effort, or you don't care? I won't put it that way, but
I think that it would be complementary. So we do not get down to the individual person level for that, but where we can provide great value is more on that cold start. So looking at or tailoring your message when somebody comes to the site for the first time, having zero context about who they are, providing some information there to help kind of guide them through your recruitment funnel and to bubble up the job postings that may be of the most interest, and then using that along with other tools that you would use kind of deeper in your funnel for analyzing the individual fit for the person coming in for that role. And then the other thing is to also just look at the trends and the aggregation of your data and how that changes over time. And if you're doing an effort to revamp the way that your postings are, or if you've been looking for different talent over time, being able to kind of take a look at those trends and those patterns and to see how your messaging has impacted the traffic and the hiring that you've done over the years.
Right. Yeah, as good marketers, that's you kind of bench checking your messaging as to whether you're attracting the right people or not. So that's right on the mark for it. It strikes me that many of these folks that were looking at the assessment put the assessment at the front end, which became very costly in a general sense. And what you're suggesting is do pulse at the front end and use the assessments of the refinement at the back end, which I think
Pulse plugs in as an input in your overall strategy, so it's not it doesn't fit every use case down through there, but it definitely provides some additional context at the top of your funnel.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is a top of the funnel tool, not a bottom of the funnel tool. So
right.
And I forget who asked the question about specific use cases. Pulse as a product is a very, very new product, but this work we've been doing for about 10 years. And the use case that I think is the most compelling was in a marketing context, working for a large travel company. One of the things that we wanted to tease out was can we identify through anything that we have, any data that we have on hand, whether this is a solo female traveler, and if so, we want to talk to them very differently than we would anyone else, because they have special concerns, and we can attract and convert those. In this case, it's not recruiting, but it's similar again to recruiting. We want that audience. That's something that we've made a decision to pursue, and we want to talk to them, and we're going to talk to them very differently. And we were able to do that and make a measurable, substantial, measurable uplift in those conversions. And then that all happens at the top of the funnel. But a higher quality input at the top of the funnel makes the whole rest of the funnel go much, much more smoothly. And in a recruiting context, I mean, if you can improve the quality of the candidates coming in the top of the funnel, then you're saving tons and tons of time through the rest of the process, right? As it gets more and more hands-on.
And then through
go ahead, Anne.
No,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, John, based on your comment, so if the intention is to want to talk to a certain type of individual, is that intention still to sell the product, i.e. a trip, or so we care about who you are, and we align ourselves with vendors, airlines, hotels, etc., that will cater to you. So in a sense, the end product is measuring the fact that I'm making that sale. Is that what you were getting out of the marketing, or did I miss a point on that?
Well, in that case, yeah. So we're measuring uplift that way. But I mean, when you're recruiting, you're selling maybe the most difficult thing in the world to sell, right? You're selling somebody a substantial change to their life. Mm-hmm. Like if it's an airline and you're a competing airline and you're trying to hire pilots, for example, I mean, you're asking them to give up seniority, and you're selling them on what? Is it going to be company culture? Is it going to be lifestyle? Is it going to be scheduling? Is it going to be, there's so many things that might be important to them. And what this does is helps you identify at the top of the funnel where to focus your efforts.
Right.
And then again, using it as an input along with behavioral data that you can get from your digital experience platform, whatever you have under the hood. It's an input that you can pair with information on, what landing page they came in from, what specific job posting, what campaign token, and it just becomes another input that you can use to tailor the message and better understand and augment the profile of the person that you're talking to.
So when you talked about the data sets, John, it just strikes me, and again, this is the world I live in, so maybe my view is a little myopic, but wellness programs, let's say, for starters. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of data coming in now that people are finding that the wellness programs are a very big perk. There are peripheral perks that organizations are giving, like, Giftogram. Let me give you a subscription to Netflix, or give you a Visa card, and you can send it any way you want. I mean, are you looking at those kind of things out there where there's a significant amount of data being gathered that might relate itself nicely to the marketing perspective of what you're getting? In other words, if I'm looking at outdoors type of living and so on, maybe a wellness program that gives you opportunities to do, certificates for discounts on boat trips, or whatever the case. I mean, I see this, that we've got a wealth of data. The question becomes, how do you approach it and how do you analyze it that gets to the purpose? And so I'm curious what your thoughts are about some. There may be some people I could introduce you to real quickly.
Up here, you just have to offer people a free kayak.
Yeah,
again,
I just saw on cool materials a collapsible kayak. Very cool.
So
Very cool.
one of the things one of the ways we talk about this tool is talk to your visitor as if you're a local in their town, like as if you know them that well. If you were recruiting in Acton, Maine, and you wanted the outdoorsy types, I mean, you could say, you know, like you get a sign up bonus. Your sign up bonus is a kayak, a nice, you know, whatever. That would work here. Whereas I can think of, you know, if you gave us a Starbucks gift card, we wouldn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
No, so it sounds like you're really in a very good position. I keep asking myself as people get into the early stages of a product like this, that there's an extensibility maybe that you built into it without it intentionally, but you have that ability to now start doing some very cool stuff that simply differentiates you that much further, serves the client even better than what you're doing right now, which is great. So offline we'll talk about some of the vendors that we've reviewed that may be of help to you. And they, of course, would get something out of that as well. So
the other thing that we can do is also ingest custom data sets for an individual organization. So if you have different recruiters or HR folks that would be the right contact for somebody coming in, then, you know, really simple personalizations based on if they're coming from this location, show this contact information. You know, so there are little applications like that.
Yeah, so if you have territories and somebody's on the site, that's something that we do all the time.
Now, you mentioned there's different data out there. Are you considering or do you have experiences with global clients yet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Like I say, the COVID situation made it, you know, well, you have to travel at least to my headquarters here in the United States. I don't want to pay for international travel. Doesn't matter anymore. We don't move. We just look up. So, okay, that's cool to know. Questions from the audience. I'm dominating the conversation here, and I don't want to do that. Any other perspectives? Do you want to show the product? Is that something you want to do? Do you want to take us through a little exercise? I'll leave that to your discussion if you're prepared to. It's always nice to see what will the client see, what will you see, what do I get out of it, so to speak.
Yeah, this is the visualization that shows you the specific traffic source, data source that you're looking at. So you can see the hotspots where you get the most traffic. So the legend on the bottom here shows you areas where you have a high market affinity and high traffic would be colored in the darker color. You can also see how your data changes over time. So by going through, you can see changes to those hotspots from there. You can also take a look at what your more details about your individual top segments. And again, this is variable by time, so you can pick whatever date range you're looking for and it'll update what those top market segments are. You can view this infographic detail that shows more information about the characteristics of those neighborhoods from a statistical point of view, everything from political leanings to
this is an HR call. We're not allowed to talk about half the stuff on an HR call.
True. But the positive associations with various brands, negative associations with various brands, breakdowns of types of restaurants that are in the neighborhood. So just a lot of data that comes along with those that you can see from each of those different segments.
Yeah, and when Ann changes the time frame, these top segments and this whole infographic changes. So this is an infographic you can generate and use in a presentation in like PowerPoint form on the spot. And this is interrogating, in this case, you know, millions of data points, and it's generating that infographic. I mean, hit apply and it's there. It's done. The analysis is done. So there's a lot of power under the hood here that might not be obvious, but for, you know, if you're giving a presentation and you need this data chomped through right now, there it is. that's always available for you to grab and download.
And then you can tie that back to the timing of your campaigns, your marketing campaign.
Yep, you can say in the last 90 days, we've attracted, you know, especially if you're going after a specific segment, like we want to hire lots of beer drinkers. You can go and you can do a campaign to attract beer drinkers, and you can watch to see whether that engagement is happening. It's a really bad example for jargon.
The first one that came to mind, right? Gotcha. So I'm curious, have you looked at the higher education places? So here's the premise, and let me lay that out first. That's where my mind goes. So college campuses really don't exist any longer. At least they do physically, but a lot of people are going to do online classes, end of sentence. So the question now becomes, if I were in a university or higher education and I want to help place graduate students into intern programs, maybe your ability to go to that university and say, here's the deal, here's where all your students are, and here's what's going on, and you could build a nice relationship with Starbucks, and they're out hiring, and let's put something out there to tell them where to go look for these interns that are our students. I mean, it strikes me that, you know, kind of there's a pairing. In fact, there's an entire app out there called Ripen that we're going to see, by the way, folks, in a couple of weeks, that is helping place interns in corporate intern programs. So I'm thinking that the reverse of that with your tool would maybe help people to find out who the employers that they ought to go to, and find out if the jobs and their people match up to those jobs very well. So much for that premise, right?
I'm trying to imagine this.
Yeah, my mind wanders. I made a left turn in there. But anyway, we'll come back to that one. But I see the world of higher education almost as a very forgotten market where the new workforce is coming out of, but we've now watched them go home, so to speak, for the most part, or at least not on campus. And in some cases, students are moving back to their origins. And so finding them and doing stuff with them for jobs is a little more difficult than it was before. I was thinking job fairs. We used to go to a college campus and here's our tent. Boom, come see us. It's now that we have to go to them where they are, and it's in this digital world. And finding them is what I think your tool is helping us do.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a geospatial tool. So we're going to tell you where people are, you know, or what people are talking about in those places. So specifically in that context, instead of having everyone come to your tent, you're taking it to them in the form of a Facebook ad or in the form of a LinkedIn ad. And you can geographically constrain those ads, and instead of advertising in, you know, the middle of, well, actually the worst places to advertise are in major metropolitan areas, right? So you're going to pay top dollar. If you're going to advertise in major metro areas, at least constrain to those, you know, the boroughs that make sense for the kind of job that you're asking people if they're interested in, right?
Okay. Yeah. So Rob, you're asking a question out there, and I do want to make sure, again, this is a new product, so you don't have any business cases right off the bat for the recruiting side per se, but you were talking about the marketing. So maybe give us something that's maybe a little bit further than what you did for the last business case about how you can help a person or an organization target the market. And the analysis you guys is what I found fascinating. It's not all machine learning and automation. There's a human side to your analysis that is really pretty cool stuff. So do you want to give us that as well? And then Rob, you mentioned something about Siemens doing something with the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. Was it somewhat what I was describing?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So Siemens has a manufacturing management internship program that they run out of UNC Charlotte. And I can, that's an example of, to me, of where I would want to be recruiting students for that, and making sure that I recruit them from the right place, not just a place where there are lots of people. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what I was struggling to wrap my mind around through all of this is, I buy into the demographics, I buy into all the other stuff, but I've worked with some pretty unique clients, and the one that's easiest is I have a friend of mine who runs a vineyard in Sonoma County, California, and he's always looking for good people. Where does he look? And the typical behavior, just like the typical behavior in Silicon Valley, California, is look in your backyard. And that doesn't necessarily meet with his needs or those other things. And that's kind of what I was struggling with is how do I build a business case that's beyond the 50,000 foot level that requires the recruiter to have a level of intimacy with their organization such that they understand that it's really, really stupid to try to recruit call center people in Jacksonville, Florida, because Jacksonville, Florida already has a whole mess of call centers and everybody's quit because they're so miserably managed. And I'm just making that as an example. It is true that Jacksonville is not a good place to have a call center anymore. And I once had a situation that I saved my company a few $100 million because we were trying to build a manufacturing plant in Singapore. And it was 2,500 employees. It was going to be big. There's only one little problem in Singapore still. This was almost 20 years ago, but they have full employment in Singapore. So if you're trying to to staff a lab with 12 people, I suppose you could. 2,500 people, there's no way in God's green earth that you're going to find 2,500 people coming to work in your manufacturing facility over somebody else's.
Yeah.
And so those, but there's the assumption, I'm making the assumption, and I was incorrect with the Singapore guys because I was the American who had to come in and say, "Are you serious?" and explain to the staff that no, this is stupid. As politically correctly as possible, but you have to. There's an expectation of a recruiter rising to the occasion, which, in my personal opinion, has been a rare occurrence lately. But having some intimacy with the market, the business, and it's more than some of the high level demographics. So a long-winded way of saying, help me understand how it would work. Does that make sense?
It does. So I'm going to go all the way back to the vineyard. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Assuming, it's and it depends on the role that you're hiring for, right? So are you hiring for wine lovers? Are we looking for people to staff the front end of the vineyard and serve the tourists that are rolling through?
No. We're looking for people who have skills in making wine. Because what you just described, the wine lovers, they're easy to find.
Yes, and yeah, we even have a segment for them.
Absolutely, they're easy to find. It's people who have skills in making wine, whether they are certified, in some cases they can be, or in the growing process. And again, my friend Jim has been in the wine business for 35 years, and he apprenticed for 10. So again, it requires some level of intimacy with that which you are working with. You don't just go in and say, hey, I'm going to be a winemaker. You got to apprentice basically, and you got to learn the trade and learn the skills and so on and so on and so on.
Right.
So
if you're seeing the screen, Rob, I think John's bringing up some data points, if you will, that could be refined. So.
Well, so there are a couple of things in there. One is that if we're hiring for a really low volume, if you're hiring 1 or 2 or maybe even 10 people, this probably isn't the tool that's going to help you fill the top of the funnel, right? You're not going to hire a CEO. I don't think it would help with that. But one thing that we can do, we do have the ability to create custom market segments from custom social listening data. So we can look for specific people that talk about specific kinds of things. I don't think that it would help in this specific context, right? This is the wrong tool for that job. But if you were looking for a specific group of people who are interested in automotive engineering, say, and they use phrases, expressions, they say things online that make them identifiable, then we could train a model to seek them out and see if they all happen to live in one neighborhood or another. That's something where we could help for specialty applications. But yeah, it's definitely it's not a hammer for every nail. It would definitely play in a more high volume, either hiring for remote workforce for a specific role, or for do I want to put a factory where we're going to have to hire 2,500 or 10,000 people. In that context, it could.
My example in Singapore is they ultimately built the factory in Kuala Lumpur because they couldn't staff it. But
yeah, well, that's straight demographics. So that's one of the fun things that you can do. We look at it a little bit differently than that, just because we're in this case primarily focused on social listening data.
Well, I really buy into Nove's example with education, because that's looking for interest. And for example, I do analytics. I'm a statistician. The people who do the kind of work that I do, we're not centered anywhere. The closest group of people that are centered anywhere is New York City, and there's a small group in the San Francisco Bay Area, but that's about it. And everybody else is, the best analytics guy I know is based in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and he has nothing to do with the university. So, but that, it's a specialized job. People desperately need it. They haven't quite figured out what it means, but I can see looking for talent.
Yeah.
Right now, the closest thing to talent is LinkedIn, and that's kind of flaky. So I can see something like this being valuable if, to solve narrow needs. Broad needs for universities would be awesome, especially given all the transition universities are going to be going through in the next couple of years.
So I'm curious, Rob, you mentioned something I wanted to ask John and Anne very quickly. Is the way I write my job descriptions and my website in a general sense, although you say that the targeted marketing type of thing of showing pictures, but are the job descriptions important because they are really not well written to things? Is that an area that I can improve myself?
That's not exactly our area of special expertise there.
But both could be an input to taking a look at overall success levels of the folks that go through the funnel, and the differences between various job postings. So let's say you A/B test through your digital experience platform. You can see if there's a clear winner between a couple of different job postings if you are working on some of your messaging there, and you can measure trailing engagement. So after somebody has read a given job description, do they go through and digest everything on your site to prepare for the interview, or do they not? And can you tell the difference in how they performed during the actual interview process. So there are things that you could use also as a beginning input for that, and then basic A/B testing. So we do workshops around measuring engagement levels and that, so that I would think would be more, Pulse could be an input to some of it, and then there's some legwork that has to be done to set up the A/B testing and come up with, you know, what's going to resonate with your applicants.
Yeah, and to the university example, you know, you have enough data there to say, where are our high performing students coming from? Let's recruit there. I can feel Carrie staring at me, and the implicit bias in that search is pretty bad. But again, this doesn't replace human input, but it does provide additional, like it shines light on things that might not otherwise be visible.
Yeah. One other question that came in,
sure.
just that the level of specificity in the area that we look at is about the equivalent of 10 city blocks.
Yeah.
For the neighborhoods, how closely we define those.
That's pretty close. Yep. So a very quick question from the perspective of, if I were your client, what do I need to prepare myself for to give you, and how long would it take me to get a program up and running for, let's say, a particular position?
So in terms of digesting the data, who is being attracted to the site? Most of you will have all that installed already through Google Analytics. So we can ingest data directly from Google Analytics. You set up a view for a post or for a role, and then we look at that. And then the other source of data that we would want to look at, again, are those high performers. So just a list of zip codes or other, you know, roughly identifying feature of the high performers. And from there, we're off to the races. That's really all the inputs that we need.
That sounds pretty slim and easy to deal with. Again, audience, please, any questions of John and Ann? So we're coming up on the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, including Ann's and John's. I will simply say thank you very much for joining us. This is, like I say, it's going to take a little bit of while for us HR-oriented people to get our heads around marketing. That's always a scary thought. HR is not known for marketing, and I say that gently, but I think it's got some interesting traction to it. I'd love to say, and I would be happy to invite you guys back, after you've gotten a couple of HR clients to do this. Hopefully we can help to be instrumental in getting that. I'd love to invite you back. I think to Rob's point, the use cases are going to be pretty key in being able to show the value. Certainly making that quantum leap from marketing into recruiting and selecting people is a hard leap for us. But I think when you start showing a use case that really bears, you know, we were looking for these people for 6 months, we did this campaign, and boom, now we got them. I think there's probably a number of startups that would also be invited to your use case TRC section, because those guys are struggling all the time to find the right people. They don't know where to look. They really don't know where to look. Even if their stuff is to be done, you know, I'll put it this way: your use case of going to find people, could you use your product today and find your better developers? And the answer is probably yes. In fact, hint, that sounds like a good use case in its own right. That was free advice, by the way. And I always say to people, the advice I give you is worth what you paid for it, and this is free advice, so you figure it out. So,
well,
anyway,
having us on.
Any last, you know, parting shots? Like I say, I like it. I like it that it is simplistic in one sense, but it's complex in the others, in the richness of the data that you get. And I think it's going to take a little bit of orienting people to really understand what the value is that you're giving them, because the data, as I continue to use your service, I will get better about what it is I need, as opposed to saying, here's a job, go find me people. And I think we're just, you know, to me, recruiting is changing vastly. And I won't say we'll ever do without recruiters necessarily, because this is being recorded, but we may not need that many recruiters.
Well,
I can't imagine
to your
that.
point, I think the paradigm of the role of the recruiter changes dramatically, and I see this, you know, everywhere, where teachers are getting in the way of the company's ability to meet their strategic objectives because they're not nimble enough, they're not fast enough, they're not intimate enough with their company. They're just cranking through the easy jobs. And as you were talking, I was thinking, place I would be pitching this are school systems. School systems are desperate. It's going to be even worse over the next 3 months. But school systems are desperate for teachers, for people interested in being a teacher. Much of their problem is they don't know where to find them. They've pissed off so many of their regular teachers that they're down to nothing, and they haven't figured out that they've got to make it worth our while to teach, not just if you can't do anything else, maybe you can teach. Which is their recruiting pitch.
But the framework of education as we know it today, where you travel to a school site, so you're in the district or you're willing to commute for the distance, that has all changed. So to your point, finding the people that can teach, especially in the online world, no matter where you are, maybe I have to get up, 3 hours earlier than my normal time zone, but I get to quit earlier, that much earlier. So the whole framework, actually, I would ask maybe John and Ann writing a pretty good white paper on the changes in the environments that people work in and how your product does kind of what Rob is saying and others, that this is our way to find people faster, better, and more in line with what you're looking for. That might be an interesting white paper in its own right. And again, happy to help out any way we can. All righty, folks, again, thank you very much, and we'll be seeing you next week. We have another vendor coming through, a Giftogram. I won't. Sometimes the name of the company says what they do, and other times it's just a nice name, like Korea. So I didn't ask you what that meant, but we'll do that for another time. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our invitation to bring you back, regardless. You owe us an explanation. All right, everyone, stay well, be safe, talk soon.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
All righty.
Bye.